Hello and welcome to Makers.dev episode number 28. Chris, have you eaten today?
Yes, multiple
Good.
times.
I think it's a greeting in different cultures is like instead of how are you, you ask if someone's eaten.
I've heard that in China, right? I think that's where I've heard it anyway. Yeah. Have you eaten yet? Yeah.
Makes sense. But I just wanted to mix it up today. What have you eaten? It sounded like you were going into details.
I was
Answer the
just
question.
going to explain that my daughter had a birthday recently, and so we have lots of leftover hot dogs and pizza bagels. And so I've eaten hot dogs and pizza bagels.
My favorite state of living in my parents' house growing up as a child was right after we had a party. There would usually be some sort of catering, sometimes like a fajita feast or something. And you always get a little more than you think you're going to need for the party. So there would be like a 20% surplus. And depending on the size of the party, that 20% surplus could then be like, ooh, this is now what I get to eat for the next like 4 or 5 days. I get to have like, a fajita. And I loved that. Just like it's consistent food that's there, that's the same. And I think that drives some people crazy. They get sick of leftovers. But for me, it's just like if I got a machine that's pumping out little Christian food meals and I just don't have to think about food, that is my ideal relationship with food at a baseline level. So is that good or bad that you have a surplus of hot dogs and these pizza bagels?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of the same. I like eating sort of the same thing all the time. It drives my wife crazy. So if we have lots of leftovers, she'll freeze as much as she can freeze, and so that she doesn't have to eat the same thing all the time. But yeah, I kind of like it.
Meal prepping, I think, is a good solution to that. It would be a good compromise. Most women I have interacted with, I don't know if this is a gender thing. I guess there have been some men like this too that I've interacted with. Crave more novelty in food, and I totally get that. I think I feel that in different contexts. Just with food, it's like Soylent. Yeah, I was one of the first. I had Soylent that I got from Kickstarter, I think, and I was like, oh, this is great. I never have to think about food again, and that didn't quite pan out. But I think a good compromise to like never having to think about food but also having variety would be something like meal prepping, or something like you freeze dry a bunch of meals, and then every time you make something you make 10 times more than you need, and then store in some way the other 9/10, and then you can mix together that 9/10 after you've been doing that for a month. Okay, well, now we can go back and have the meal that we had on the first and then mix that together with all these other ones. That's a machine that I really want to build that is not yet built, that I think would be a good solution to food.
One thing you could try, one thing I've done recently, so this is sort of a tangent from everything, but so frozen meals have come a really long way since I was a kid. There are frozen meals now that are $5 or less that are made with like real ingredients, and they taste really good. And so yeah, you might want to look at the latest frozen meals, because yeah, you can stick them in the microwave for 5 minutes or something, and you have a great meal that's actually made with real ingredients. And so
that's so interesting to hear you say as a solution, because like, yeah, I have written off frozen meals. It's like, oh, it's all junk. What if I made my own frozen meals? That's a thing I could do. Yeah,
you can do that too.
Okay, sure. Yeah, there's places to push forward on this project. Noted. You just entered a new AI contest, and you're already in the #1 spot. That's amazing. Tell me more about that.
So after I got 5th in the last one, I entered a new one. In the last one there were 1,200 teams. This one only has like a 200 currently. So, and I'm #1, but my error, it's a GPS, so it's outdoor GPS, and the other one was indoor Wi-Fi. So it's a similar problem but different, because outdoors and GPS. My error is currently like 5 meters, and I expect the error will be down around 1 or 2 when it's all over. And so I have a long way to go. But yeah, currently I'm in #1, so that feels pretty good.
It's amazing. I'm really curious. I've gone through this a few times of really wanting to learn about AI and machine learning stuff. And we talked about it on previous episodes. You recommended fast.ai. I'd love to just hear sort of a high-level overview of your process of solving a problem like this without getting into detail that would cause someone listening to this podcast to usurp your #1 spot. But how do I think the input for something like this is like a giant table of it's a timestamp and what the actual location was and what the phone's GPS location was. Is that what the input looks like? And then what do you do after that? How do you tackle this sort of problem?
Yeah, so this one is interesting. It's actually more complicated than that. they have all that data, but then they also have the raw. It's called GNSS. So this is like the numbers that will allow you to calculate the distance to satellites. And so it's like the lowest level you can go. And so it has like the satellite locations and the pseudo ranges to them, and then if you can triangulate and stuff. I am not there yet. I am currently working on a higher level, which is kind of what you talked about. It has, so they provided like a baseline level. So there's several standard algorithms for finding a location. The one they provided is like 7 meters or so accuracy. And I basically I've taken that and sort of finessed it into 5 meters or so accuracy. And then I have another step that I can go before I need to look at the raw GNSS logs. But then once you get into GNSS, like what they did is they mounted multiple phones on a dashboard, so you can actually compare the GNSS logs for multiple phones. And that's really where you can get down to like meter or sub-meter accuracy with GPS. So yeah, I expect the winning solutions will get to sub-meter in the next. There's like almost 3 months left, so there's a lot of time left.
How did you get a meter more accurate just looking at the data from GPS? Is this just like a standard machine learning thing that you threw the toolkit at it and said, here, look at all this information and try to make it better, and you don't really understand how it made it better? It just did from the tool set?
This is where I might get a little cagey because the contest is still going on, and Calco rules actually prevent you from talking about your solution outside of their forums.
Chris, I'm secretly the person in number 2. This whole podcast has been a ruse.
Yeah, you could imagine that GPS signals can be kind of jittery. And if you have multiple phones, each with sort of jittery outputs, and you sort of combine them in smart ways, then you can get kind of a smoother, more accurate output.
Okay.
That's what I'll say, yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. Interesting. I'm very curious about this. We'll get into that later. So this is not the image problem. This is not the sound problem. So we don't need your big beefy computer for it yet.
Yeah, that's
what's the
still
ETA on that?
That's still I don't know. I've gotten no new emails. Supposedly 2 to 3 weeks since last week. So I don't know. Okay. Hopefully soon, but we'll see.
It's like Christmas. Christmas. It's Chris.
Yes. I got it.
Cool. So this one is just text, and you have the 2 other problems you were doing with images and sound, and I guess those are waiting for the new computer. And then you're running this one still on Google Colab. Is that right?
Yep.
Cool. Sounds good. Man, I was talking about AI earlier this week and just the transformation power of it and how it's still just in its little baby stage. And I want to get really good at this. I think that's not really good. I want to get passively good at it, enough to better understand, like, okay, this is how you would solve this sort of problem or recognize it. That's something we've talked about before on the show, but I think you're making a really, really good bet of where to put your time. I think understanding this is just going to pay dividends. The power and ability to solve these complicated problems is the type of solutioning that I think will continue to be the most valuable in society, and that's just going to expand, and that's just going to magnify. So cool. I love it. You also said you had some other big news. What do you got?
Yeah, and it ties directly into this, plus we can talk about some other stuff. But yeah, so I talked to you, and then I talked on the podcast about this to Matt Swanson, but not to you. But I applied to a master's program, and I got in. So
oh my gosh, congratulations.
Yeah, I'm do
that's
a
so
CS
exciting.
Masters. It's all online, which is great. It's through UT Austin, and they use the edX platform, which is like MIT made it, I think, originally, but now it's like a generic kind of platform. And I chose it because one, it was very reasonably priced compared to other online master's programs. You get the exact same degree as if you went in person, which is nice. And the curriculum, there's limited class selection, which is one of the downsides to it, but all of the a large percentage of the classes are ML or AI focused, because the UT Austin CS department is very AI heavy, and so it's exactly the kind of curriculum that I wanted, and so it doesn't matter, that it's limited because I want to take like every class. So so yeah, it's designed to be, you can do it full or part time. So I'll probably do it part time. It'll take between 1.5 and 3 years, so maybe 2.5 years, something like that. Yeah, and I'm doing it for the same reason you just said. Like, I really want to understand this better. It's very interesting because many people take masters because they want to get higher salaries at their jobs, or they want to get a
Mm.
different job that they can't currently get. Like if they had a degree that's not in CS, then you might do a CS
Mm.
masters to kind of get into CS. Um, I'm not doing it that way. Like I'm doing it to really understand the material better. So like, yeah, I think it'll be very interesting. We'll see what happens.
I'm so excited for you. I think this is absolutely a great bet, a fantastic way to spend money to in a way that the returns from that money are going to be astronomically higher than any other place where you could spend the money. I think it's a great decision. And at the same time, I'm curious that in 2021, for someone who doesn't really care about the piece of paper, that the place where you've landed as the most effective way to be learning this information is a traditional degree program. That sort of breaks my worldview. My current framing of universities is that it's sort of a more antiquated model that's designed to take people in the middle of the pack and sort of just schlep everyone forward at about the same pace, and that the primary value of that is in the accreditation, that like they can verify that yes, this person completed this number of hours. And for someone in your position who's just interested in learning the material, my previous model was that that's not effective because you can just read a book about it, or you can go off and learn at your own pace, whatever organically the thing is that you want to be learning. I think the argument the argument I was making when we talked about this a few weeks ago was like, how much more would you learn just by doing contests and just figuring out whatever you needed, and how much faster could you go versus the master's program. I'm curious about that. Of what was behind that decision of doing the master's program versus just continuing to do your own thing at your own pace, probably going much faster.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've thought about this a lot because I'm about to spend money, basically betting on
Right.
it. And so, yeah, in a world where a lot of people are really down on the university system, why am I doing this? There are several reasons why. It's kind of all interconnected. Why I'm doing this. The first is it's actually really reasonable. So traditional masters on site, like you could spend 30 or 40K per year just to go do a master's. This is 10K for the entire program. So like 2.5 years, 10K, and so that's very reasonable. That's about as much as I could. Well, I was gonna say could spend on like MOOCs. Like if I spent the actual money on the classes, um, like I just think it's really reasonable. Like you get access to TAs, you get access to a bunch of other people doing it. You get so so it's pretty reasonable cost. Second is now I have a brand new edu email address and I am a student again, which is interesting.
Ooh.
I can do all sorts of things. I can get discounts on software. I can go to conferences at student rates. I can email people and say, I'm a master's student. Can I, talk to you about whatever? So I'm
Yeah.
thinking about all different ways that I might be able to leverage the fact that I'm a student again. It's especially like if I want to talk to other professors, other people, even at different universities, other researchers, like it's something now that I can leverage as like as an in. I will at least get talking to a lot of these people because I am a student at whatever.
Mm.
So that is interesting, even though the credential doesn't matter as much. The fact that I'm a student again, which is something I'm still wrapping my head around, actually kind of does. So that's neat. The other is I could learn. So everything I'm about to learn, I could learn by just buying the textbook and reading it or whatever. But like, will I? Will I really? No. So now I am paying someone to grade me on my performance. And so I'm definitely going to do the material. And so that's kind of the other reason. So it's accountability. Like I'm paying someone to grade me. I'm a student again, so that comes with all sorts of interesting things. Yeah, and so that's why I did it this way. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. 10 grand, I agree, is very reasonable. That's, I think 30 by 500 now costs something like $3,000, and is a course designed to be taken in like 1 or 2 months. That's at the scale of what a reasonable course would cost. So that's great to hear that they're like competitively priced, especially for the number of classes that you're taking, and there's value in merely the curation of, we're teaching you this information in this order, and this is the information that we've decided is the most important, and access to TAs, and I imagine networking if you get to meet the other people in the class and the teachers. And yeah, I think absolutely, that's very reasonable money to spend. And also, like, there's nothing precluding you from going off and learning on
Oh
your
yeah,
own in addition
yeah,
to doing these things. And I think that's probably what you're gonna do. You're gonna keep doing these contests and everything else. So okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think if this was something that cost 200 grand,
yeah.
that would be a different scale of like for 200 grand. There are more creative ways that you could be spending the money. You could be hiring the professors of these courses and have them be your private tutor for a month at a time or something like that. Okay, I'm sold on that. That makes sense. You mentioned also having the edu
Yeah.
email address as a perk, and the having the motivation. I'll address those in reverse order because, well, no, I'll do it in that order. I had the thought, how strict is the edu TLD policed? Like, I've never tried to do this, but could I have genco.edu as an email address, and then I could have christian@genco.edu, and then I could
Yeah, so
email Amazon and say, hello, I'm a student, kind of.
it's
Can I please have Amazon Prime for free?
so you can't just do that, as far as I understand.
Okay.
And also, a lot of these places, it's not just having the edu email address; it's having the edu email address and then actually clicking the box that says, "I am an actual student." And so, yeah, you could lie and click it, right? But that's not my mo. So, like, now that I'm an actual student, I can click the box saying I'm a student. So, yeah.
Yes. I don't think I would feel like I was lying. Like, I take classes all the time. I never want to not be a student. I'm not like affiliated with a university, but I don't know that to be a student you have to be affiliated with a university. It feels to me like being a student is more of a mindset than anything else. This is getting philosophical.
A little bit. But I do know you can't just get an edu.com or an edu domain. You have to be like an actual. I don't know what the proof is, but you can't just get one. So
that feels like a thing to be gamified. This week I'm going to see if I can get an edu
right.
DLT. I'll see what that is. And then the motivation you mentioned, very much in line with work in progress with Alex Hillman. This idea that you can pay money for accountability, that in itself has a lot of value. Which leads to my next question. How is work in progress going? I think you said your first meeting was last week, I think on a Thursday or something. Has that been pushed forward, or do you feel like you're getting the motivation and accountability you wanted from that?
Yeah, so that was great. That was a spotlight session, and I was one of the people. So I came away with lots of different advice. Basically, a spotlight session is everyone gives advice about your project. So it was great. I for a long time was trying to figure out what meeting place was. I didn't want to push it forward too hard there are several reasons. One was because I was getting lots of support requests from like non-technical groups, and these are support requests like how do I upload a picture, which I never get from technical groups, right? So I was like, well, okay, do I pivot meeting place to be like technical, so there's like software meetup focused, or what do I do? Got the great advice that it's more like professional kind of groups that I never get. So there's like some professional kind of groups that I get on there, and I haven't exactly figured out the wording, but so I think I'm going to try to pivot the messaging to be from like anything to more professionally oriented groups. So that might be technical, but it's also like, so Indie Hall is one of the members, and so they're like a co-working space, right? And so, and I get great feedback from them. Never these kind of support requests that I like can't handle. And so if I could figure out how to pivot meeting place into more of this kind of professional meetup-y kind of space, then I feel like I can push forward a lot harder on it and not have the support burden, which is now even more important because I'm about to be at least half-time into a master's program. So
Yes.
yeah, I only got the news of this a few days ago, and so I'm still sort of processing what all it means. But come the fall, at least 20 hours a week I'm going to be spending on like homework and projects and stuff. So I'm going to need to figure out how that fits into everything else I'm doing.
I like the specification that your audience is professional groups. I think that's a good answer to the question that I think we've talked about before too on the show of who to be targeting, because then that informs every decision that you make, every feature request, and everything you ask yourself first the question: does this benefit for professional groups? Do I need to make image uploading simpler? Well, no, because professional groups are professionals. They use software like this. They know how to upload images. That makes a lot of sense. I had that thought also fitting this in with graduate student stuff. Paradoxically, when I find myself in similar positions, the more I do, the more capacity I have to be able to do work. So, like, right now, I've sort of been in life focused on more of these low level problems of like housing and diagnosing air quality problems and figuring out food and all these things. And because that's sort of where my mind is at, and that's where my momentum is, it's much easier to get things in that realm done. I'm not spending nearly as much time sitting on a computer doing work and carving out large chunks of time to have as focused work for doing those things. And with any sort of structure, if I had a class that I had to show up to, an hour a day and it's at the same time, and it's work where I'm sitting in the chair and I'm watching the lecture, it's so much easier to tack onto that other similar work as a habit that just happens sort of automatically. So if I know I'm tied to the mast, I have to be watching this lecture every day at 10 a.m. and okay, well, now my day sort of structures around that of, well, if that starts at 10 a.m., that means I have to wake up at this time. If I'm up at that time, I'd like to be able to eat and work out before the class starts. So I would need to wake up and then take a walk and then come back and eat and then sit down. And I'd like to have 10 minutes to meditate. So I'll make sure that all that ends 10 minutes before the class, and then I do the class. So, I've sort of consolidated and collapsed the morning that's more structured. And then I do the class. And then after the class, well, now I'm in this position where all of the stuff is set up already, and I get to do whatever I want from here. Let's tack on, well, let's do customer support emails after that, and then let's do an hour of the development side of the work. So I'm curious to hear what your experience is. When I've been in similar positions, I find myself able to get even more done just because of the structural organization, secondary qualities of the thing that I'm doing. I actually have more time. I'm reminded of a adage also. I'm not going to get the wording right on this, but it's something like, if you want to get something done, give it to someone busy, because they're much more likely to do it than someone who doesn't have anything on their plate. I would like to be the busy person who's just constantly churning through things, and like, yes, I'm working for 20 hours a week on this thing, but my nth hour is much less difficult to organize and to get stuff done in than someone's first hour if they're not doing anything in the week, and now they have to bootstrap this entire process of being able to get stuff done. So I'm curious to hear how that goes for you.
Yeah, I'm interested too. I think you're right. Like, some structure is good, so like it provides at least some outline for how to do things. Paul Graham had a quote once. He was talking to a bunch of college students, and he says, someone asked him a question about something, and he said, actually having kids really focuses you, because you have to get more stuff done per unit of time if you want to get anything done at all. And then he said, but I don't advocate having kids as a way to be more productive. And I kind of feel like that's the same way. Like doing a master's degree will probably focus me in the time I'm not doing it, but I will probably still feel a little more overwhelmed than I am right now. Because it's just packing more in per unit of time. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how my productivity goes up or down.
I guess the best situation would be if you could trick yourself into thinking you had kids or had a master's program. Like, I would love to be able to just say, okay, I'm going to tie myself to the mast of, at 10 a.m. every day, I'm going to do this work that is sort of arbitrary. I'm the only person I'm being held accountable to, but every day at 10 a.m. I'm going to make sure I do an hour of development work, and that's going to happen every day, because now that's not wasted work. Not to say that having kids is wasted work, but it's what am I trying to say? It's like work in the direction that I actually want to go in, and it would be great to be able to have that without also having to have external accountability, because I think that's not as sticky in my brain as it is for other people. I think for some reason, anytime I find myself where I have to be externally accountable, I inevitably end up at this position where I'm like, well, to continue being externally accountable, I would need to make this sacrifice of what I think right now makes the most sense. Do I really need to be externally accountable? Well, no, that's negotiable. So I'm not going to do that, and I'll figure out how to balance those priorities or make whatever correction needs to happen. I think what I may be lamenting here is that I would like to be more internally accountable and also set more things to be accountable to. At this point in my life, I think I would benefit from a little bit more structure.
Yeah. So yeah, I have two things to say about that. One is the work in progress it's mostly on Discord, and they have a Discord channel which is like focused work basically, and they have set times to do certain types of focused work. And so like they'll say, for this hour we're just going to do like like business, like accounting, bookkeeping, taxes kind of stuff. Come join the Discord at this time to do it. The problem is you have to actually join the Discord, and I haven't yet, but I probably should. But yeah, so it's like you're with other people doing the same thing, and it's like you turn video off, and so you're there. You're not really accountable, but just being there is like, I'm doing the same thing as these 10 other people in this channel at the same time. So that's kind of an interesting way to do it, and you don't have to be part of a big group to do that. You can do it with just 2 or 3 people. So that's an idea. The other one was I completely forgot the other one, but yeah, that's what work in progress. That's how they're solving it.
That's really interesting. I would love to find a way to do that works for me. There was a similar mechanic in Ali Abdal's part-time YouTuber Academy where he said, okay, for these 2 hours, I'm going to be live streaming myself, writing a script, filming a video, editing it, and then publishing it. And the idea is in these 2 hours, you're going to watch me do all of that. And so while you're on, you might as well be doing the same thing. Like, don't watch me doing the work. The point of this is to see that it can be done and then to do it yourself and be held accountable. And I did the first one, and I remember thinking, like, I can work faster than most people in this group. And I can do it. And then I came to the position where I was like, well, I don't need them. I don't need to like arbitrarily this is sort of inconvenient that it's happening at this specific time, and I could choose to do this at any time. And then what happened was like I stopped doing it, and it's a trick that I would love to be better at playing on myself. I haven't quite figured out what I need and what the rules are and how. Like, I think this podcast is a really good example of making more podcasts and making more video content is a thing that I'd like to be doing, and I am much more consistent at doing that if I have another person that is helping me with routines of like, okay, every week at this time and this day, Chris and I record this podcast. And it's not arbitrary because there's some friction in like figuring out what time works for both of us. And there is actual genuine benefit in having both of us having these conversations at the same time. And so that's this podcast recording. It has been something that's been very easy for me to do. That I think it fits in this mold. So maybe I think the thing that I struggle with is it can't be arbitrary. There has to be some sort of a like, okay, yes, we're all doing accounting at the same time, and the benefit of that is there's some sort of a thing where like, I don't know, all of us have hired an accountant to be on the call with us. And that's the time. And so individually, we're only spending $5 or $10, and combined now, the accountant's getting paid a good salary, a good hourly rate. And the benefit of that is now I can hear questions other people are asking, and I can ask my own question. And that's something that wouldn't have been possible if I was just doing my own thing. I think that's the sort of structure that I'm looking for. I love the idea of having that external accountability, and it feels like if it's arbitrary, my brain will just tear it apart and be like, there's no reason to actually be on this call all the time. So I need genuine reasons to actually be held at the mast.
Interesting. Before you said that last part, what I was going to say is maybe you could be the streamer, actually. So, you say, every Tuesday at 10 a.m., I'm going to stream myself doing something for an hour. And just put that on Twitter. And, even if no one watches, if you're live streaming, someone could. And so you better be doing the work.
Yeah.
So that's what I was going to say. You added that last part, though, about bringing an expert on. That's interesting. Like, maybe you could do the same thing, but then also bring an expert on. So, like, maybe you hire the accountant and you ask them questions for an hour, and other people could come in and ask the questions too. Then you have to shoulder all the cost, but that might kind of be a way, because then you have to like schedule it in advance. You have to book an accountant for an hour, 2 weeks out or something. And so you have to do the call. So that might be something. Can you schedule an expert, for an hour every week or something? I don't know, just ideas.
I liked it a lot. There's something there. Thinking through that specifically with bookkeeping and accountant, I think what I would be looking for is something where it wasn't like an interview, so I didn't need to be
interacting with them the whole time. I could just be going through my bookkeeping and I ask them 2 or 3 questions during that process of like, how would you categorize this expense? Does that make sense? I'm like, why am I categorizing expenses at all? That's a question I'd like answered. Why? What is the purpose of that? I know it has something to do with what I'm able to deduct, but like, what is that model? I think for this specifically, what I would love to do is just interview an accountant and just take all my accounting questions and say, hey, you're going to have my focused attention for an hour. I'm going to ask you all these questions to try to get to the bottom of what's going on. And then I could live stream that, or I could make that a podcast or something else. I like that idea a lot. And separate from that, I think I would need several people at a time to have this make sense. Of like, I don't know, there's 10 of us, and we all have to do this certain type of work at the same time. And the accountant that I had previously interviewed, I showed that video to people, and they were like, oh, I'd love to ask her my questions. But I only have like 1 or 2 questions. I don't need to book a call with her. Or him. My accountant has become female now. My personal accountant is female, so I'm picturing a particular accountant when I say this. If it's like 10 people now there's space for us to actually be doing the work and to only have like 10 or 15% of our attention on whatever the mainstream conversation was. And so we're getting the work done, and then once someone hits a stopping point that they need help from an accountant to do, they can throw it out in the world. Okay. That feels like a place I can get to, and it feels like the next step would be record a conversation with an accountant and ask the questions I've had about accounting. Accounting feels like a particularly good place to do this too, because everyone has to deal with that, and everyone has to deal with bookkeeping. Okay. Wow. What a cool idea. I like it a lot. We both separately had someone reach out to us about a previous episode that we had on ADHD, and realized at the beginning of this episode before recording that both of us have been contacted by the same person. You've already had your conversation with this person. I have a conversation on Thursday, I think. I would love to hear about what you guys talked about. What's the situation with ADHD? What did you learn?
Yeah, so this ties into a lot of what we were just talking about, actually, and it's the point I was going to make about one of the things you were talking about. So that's good. Yeah, so he reached out to both of us based on our conversation about ADHD. How we both feel a lot of tendencies or we both resonate a lot with some of the tendencies. We both maybe don't have it, maybe have it, don't know. And then we had a conversation about it, and it was a really great conversation. One of the things I love about this podcast is that I've been contacted by a few people, and I was able to pick their brain, and they were able to explain things to me that I would have never had those conversations if not for this podcast. So it was a really good conversation. A lot of the things that came up were things like, so when we talked about ADHD before, you and I both resonate a lot with some of the kind of proclivities. And one of the things he explained was that like ADHD is a spectrum. It's expressed differently in all sorts of different people. There's also like different aspects of it. So there's the hyperactive part, there's the attention part, there's different parts, and so you may have some and not the other, and then it's kind of on a spectrum for all of those things. And a lot of the things that we just talked about how do you tie yourself to the mast, how do you like I'm paying people to hold myself accountable, things like that. I'll just go through a few of the points that really helped with some of those things. One is that he said a lot of people beat themselves up because they feel like they don't have willpower, when actually, if you have ADHD, or even if you don't, but you have some tendencies towards it, it's not a question of willpower. It's like your brain is just wired differently, and you have to figure out the ways that you can behave, the things you can do so that you can behave the way you want to behave and not the way you end up behaving, which is for me like just watching YouTube, right? And one of the things is I pay someone to hold me accountable, like grade me. So in this master's program, I'm going to do the work. And so, that was one of the reasons I chose to do this, because I know I'm going to do the work if I'm paying for a course. So that was interesting. Another thing he said is one reason to go to get a diagnosis. There's a few reasons. One is you just have the diagnosis then, and then you can understand yourself better because of it. Another reason is if you need medicine, right? Which I don't think I do, based on his description of medicine and other things I've read. Right, I don't think that's quite right for me. But then another one is if you need like special uh, like special not attention, but special treatment at your school or at your job. So like at school, if you need to take a test in a really quiet room, if you have a formal diagnosis, then you can make that happen. Whereas if you don't have a formal diagnosis, it's just a lot harder. And so those were some of the things he talked about, and it's just a lot of it resonated with me really strongly. I don't think I'm going to see someone about it right now because I have a lot of those tendencies sometimes and not other times. I don't think I want medicine right now. I don't need special treatment. I don't need, these other things. And so, but it's just really interesting to hear him talk and hear a lot of that resonate with me. And so that I can sort of better understand, my direct, what I'm doing basically like how my brain's working. So yeah, that's how that conversation went.
I agree that a formal diagnosis wouldn't really be useful for either of us. We do not need permission to take tests in a especially quiet room. I'm not sure how that would play out in a workplace if you went to an employer and said, hey, I have ADHD and you need to treat me in a special way, but I don't think that applies to either of us. I think the game we're both playing is how to treat ourselves so that we're working the most effectively. And I think what I'm curious about most is if you know where you are on the spectrum for yourself in each of these things. I don't feel like I'm hyperactive, but there are ways I would like to have more control over my attention. What I'm most curious about is like tactics to use, honestly knowing yourself and how you work, to be able to move more in the long-term direction that you want to move to. And it sounds like it's the things that we're already doing, that we're already talking about, of like tying yourself to the mast and making better systems and making it easier to do the thing versus not do the thing, which really applies to everyone. There's just like habit formation. Is that right?
So,
or are there tactics specifically within ADHD that now you've opened the doors of like, oh, there's this entire toolkit of ADHD of non-medicated ways of being more effective?
Yeah. So one of the things he said too is like if you go to a doctor, you'll probably get medicine. If you go to a therapist, then you'll get a lot of these tactics. And so that's one reason to go to a therapist. Even if you don't think you have a diagnosis, like therapy can really help with all sorts of issues, giving you tactics instead of medicine or instead of other more invasive things. For example, one of the things that he did was like he started writing things on whiteboards a lot more and put the whiteboards in places where he would see them every day, And so
smart. Yeah.
So that's a great thing. I realized I solved the same problems he was talking about, but with alarms on my phone. So like I would set alarms. I still set alarms for everything. Like I have horrible time management unless I set alarms for things, like an alarm that I can't shut off unless I do the thing, So like tactics like that are things that like a therapist could help you work through, or books could help you work through, where a doctor will probably just give you medicine. Yeah.
I think the way that I've solved that for myself is with time tracker. I've built a SAS for myself, merely so I can have this external system keeping better track of time, because I recognize I cannot do that. My brain is not what if there's a cool thing that I'm doing that's particularly interesting, like every strength is a weakness. I think the strength of the way that my brain works is I can just dive into that. I can just become lost, and the entire world is just about this thing and how this thing is working. And the weakness of that is if there's anything else that I should have been doing that was not that thing, now that thing takes precedence, and now all of my scheduling of external accountability just goes out the window. So yeah, the way I can be most effective in that situation, I think, is to understand where I am, that I have difficulty with this specific category of thing, and then invest a whole lot in tools that can take that over for me. And then I can enjoy the natural strength that I have of being able to have this hyper focus. And I'm mitigating downsides by being able to rely on this external system when things go poorly. Okay, so it sounds like I'm going in the right direction. I was reminded of a friend of mine who has a son who recently got diagnosed with ADHD, and they are experimenting with Concerta, which is an ADHD medication that I'd never heard of. But I was trying to think of for myself, potential benefit of medication would be if I could choose okay, Tuesdays are my focused work day. And that's when I really just need to tie myself to the mast. And I would love to be able to shut off this creative divergent part of my brain and just be able to go through methodically, like, all right, here we go, step by step, just become a much more boring person, but a person who's getting this work done. That's something I'm interested in trying. Concerta in particular, the way it was described is it works immediately. This is not something that you need to have for a longer period of time. And then if you don't like the side effects of it, one of which I think is insomnia, which that would be bad. I would not like that at all. But if the side effects are too bad, then you just stop and then the drug stops. That feels like a safe bet to do. And at the same time, I would like to be very conservative in how I am chemically playing with my body. So I'm curious when I talk to him on Thursday, what his take on the safety and efficacy of the different medicated strategies would be.
Yeah, so there's, as far as I understand, based on my conversation with him and other research I've done, the drugs for ADHD specifically are different than the drugs for like anxiety or depression. So ADHD drugs are, yeah, you take them and then they work for 8 hours and then they turn off. Like, and so you can take it once a week if you want. When you want, you know, like on Tuesdays, you want that to be your focus day. You can take it on Tuesday, and that's it. He did say that like there's 6 or 7 drugs, I think, and they only work on about 2/3 of people, and so like there's a chance they just might not work on you at all. But the way that they're different than anxiety or depression meds is anxiety or depression meds usually you have to like ramp up, and you can't just cut them off, or else you have really bad side effects. You have to like ramp up and ramp down. Whereas these you can just take, you know, once a week or whatever, whenever you want. So if you think you might have it and you want to try that, then you can go talk to a doctor to see if, you know, you do and you qualify. But I definitely agree also with like being careful with what chemicals you put in your body is a good thing, because it can have all sorts of side effects, and, you know, chemical dependencies and stuff like that. You know, it's kind of scary stuff sometimes.
Yeah. That would be a very bad outcome if I became chemically dependent on something. And then I think if medication becomes a solution to problems that's used too frequently, okay, well, now you're in the situation that my grandmother's in, where she's taking, I think, 8 different medications, and we can't possibly know how those are interacting now. Like we've changed her chemistry so much. The bodies that the studies were done on to test each of these medications were done in were like, probably that's the only medication you're taking, and maybe there have been some studies about how 2 medications interact. So we might know the interactions between any pair of those things, but my gosh, when you introduce a third and then a fourth and then a fifth, the number of possible interactions increases exponentially. It's I think if n is the number of things, I think it's n 2 to the n.
N to the n, right?
I don't remember what the formula is. Is it n to the n?
Because
my gosh,
each drug can interact with each other drug. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, no, so that's not where I want to be. If there's a drug I'm taking, like, you know, antihistamines right now, I take maybe once a week just on really bad allergy days. I want that to be the only drug I'm taking. So maybe what this would look like for me is, okay, you know, Tuesday is my focus day where I take this limitless pill to become hyper-focused. Or not hyper-focused. I'm not even confident like what it would be like to not be in my brain. I think it would look like just I don't get distracted as easily, but then also I'm not getting in depth to the work as much. What would it be like outside of my brain? I don't know what that's like.
Yeah, so it can do many different things, based on kind of how you express, like the like how your brain expresses the thing. So one thing he explained is like, as an example, people with ADHD, they have 2 modes. They have now and not now. They don't have like any sense of planning.
Yeah.
And so like one reason like you procrastinate a lot if you have it is because like it's like, oh, this is 3 weeks away. That's not now. And then then you're like, not now. And then the night before you're like, oh, it's now or almost now. And then you do the thing.
Get out of my head.
So one thing that medicine would allow you to do is things like you would have more sense of planning, and so you could like do your taxes 3 months in advance, you know, instead of, you know, because you can actually plan it. That's my understanding. Again, we should probably preface, or, you know, suffix, I guess now, we're not doctors. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but that's my understanding.
That sounds great, and it sounds like if I was just doing that for a day a week, and that was my administrative day. And that's my one day now where I have an expanded time horizon that includes more times than now and not now. That would be enough. Okay. Next week I'm gonna have had this conversation with this ADHD specialist. And I'll also clear we haven't said his name. I don't is that okay? Can we say who this is?
I don't know. Maybe you could ask him on Thursday.
I'll ask
and
him on
Maybe we'll
Thursday.
have him on as a guest.
Yes.
Ask him if he wants to come on as a guest.
I'll ask him if he wants to
was-
be on as a guest.
I'll say it was a great conversation. He was extremely open about everything. And as far as he's not an expert, he's just someone who has it and is now kind of being very open about it and sort of spreading the message that it's okay to be open about it. It's okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so I really like that message.
My favorite type of person. Niece. Okay. Well, we'll talk about this and pick this up in the next episode. Cool. I have two things I would like your advice on. This is something I mentioned a while ago when you were first doing this deep dive into AI and machine learning of how you would recommend to get started. And at the time, you recommended Fast.ai and sort of this mix of TensorFlow and the Python version of TensorFlow. And the name of that has now escaped my mind.
Keras.
Yes. So I who knows where my attention will go by the end of today, but right now, in the current moment, there are some problems in image classification that I'm curious about. And in the long term, this is a place where I would like to have competency. I would like to have a good enough understanding of AI to be able to solve problems that AI are good at solving, or know at least what the capabilities are. If I wanted to get started with image classification, is your advice to start this Fast.ai course, or is there something else that you're more familiar with that you think would be better for fast tracking solving that type of problem?
Yeah. So if you're very interested in getting started with solving actual problems right away, then Fast.ai is definitely the way to go.
Okay.
They start, like a lot of other programs, they start ground up. Fast.ai starts with, like, I think on the first lecture, they were classifying images already.
Wonderful.
So yeah, they start with like a high level library. Yeah, it's built on PyTorch now, not TensorFlow. You don't have to worry about that too much.
Okay.
If you do Fast.ai, you'll be interacting with the Fast.ai library, which is like a library built on top of PyTorch.
Okay.
The reason I'm doing a master's is because I'm beyond that point now. I want to like understand the new research papers coming out, and so I need to understand like the base level like math and stuff. Fast.ai has very little math actually. It's really like library centric and like problem centric. So yeah, if all you want to do is classify some images, I would do Fast.ai.
Wonderful. Okay, that's how I'll push that forward then. Thank you. Second, this is a problem I've been chewing on for a few weeks that I have been stuck on, and I think I'd like your help getting unstuck of just figuring out what the next step forward is, and maybe what the next 3 steps look like. In thinking about investing, I started from this position of like, I have some money. I would like to figure out the best place to be putting this money. How do I balance this between like stocks and crypto? And then, my business is also an asset. And in thinking about that, I've come to this realization where I'm not quite sure how much it's worth for me to how much I would spend to get an extra $1,000 in cash flow. But I do know that it's a whole lot more than I'm currently spending, which is effectively nothing. And I could very easily justify spending on the order of $6,000 to increase cash flow by $1,000. And I think one of the most effective ways to do that is to hire people. And so I would like to push this project forward of getting better at buying other people's time to increase value in my life and in my business. And I have a few different avenues available to me of potential places to start that are different levels of risk and reward. And so I think what I'm struggling with is like, what's the next step? Who is the first person who I would want to hire, and what would I need to have ready before I hire them? An obvious thing to do, I think, would be to hire a React developer. Most of the stuff that I'm doing is in React. A lot of these projects that I have just sort of stagnating are waiting on me and my development time to go and push this forward. And in sort of fantasizing about like, well, what if I had a React developer right now? who I had a relationship with, who, they gave me their hours and then I sent them money. How many things would that push forward in my life right now? And it's like a dozen. There's like a dozen different things that are waiting on React development that does not necessarily have to be done by me. That if I just had a conversation with a React developer, that could then lead to, okay, 5 or 10 hours of work for them, and then I pay them money and the thing gets done. That feels like it would magnify what I'm able to do. Another person that I think would make sense to hire is sort of like a backend catch-all developer to do some of this weird stuff I'm trying to do with serverless setups and having a serverless way to run FFmpeg commands, and a handful of other things. That's sort of the only thing I have for backend work. And then a lot of friends that I have in this space have personal or administrative assistants, and that seems like a great place to spend money, because that could be like research projects. We were talking a few episodes ago about, I have a lot of open questions of things like, I saw this cool link on Hacker News, and it's very easy for me to get sucked into that and then spend the whole week on this thing, learning about this thing, and then figuring out, okay, what's the result of this? How would I like to change my life? And it'd be kind of cool to have someone where I could just say, hey, check out these links that I've triaged and give me a report of them. And at the time you mentioned that that might be a cool application for AI, if I just have an AI app summarizing it. But where I'd like to move to is that, like, I am not the person writing the app. I'm the person who has the idea and who makes a bet with my money instead of my time that this is going to be a worthwhile thing to do, and then that gets pushed forward. A personal assistant may also help me solve the problem of just perpetually being behind on email. And I think once I have a person in any of these three domains in my life where, like, I've established the relationship, I think more opportunities will start coming up of ways that I can give them more money to save me more time and ultimately make me more money in the long run. What's your hot take on that? How would you approach this problem?
Yeah, so you have a few different avenues you can go down. It's whatever you do. I would start small. A VA or some kind of personal assistant is a great way to do that. So if you want to go that direction, you said you had friends who have them. I would talk to your friends. I know there's some agencies, that do that. So it sounds like what you might want is something like an agency where you can book, I don't know, 5 or 10 hours a week or something from personal assistants. And so I would go that route, specifically the agency route, because if you go to a specific person, then it's going to be real hit or miss. But if you go to the agency, you're probably going to get like a certain level of quality. So that's kind of my guess. So you probably spend a little more for the agency route, but I'd go that way just to kind of learn the ropes of what it means to have a personal assistant. For the developers, that is interesting. If you're hiring developers, you're kind of hiring either full-time, which I would not advise you to do. It doesn't sound like you want to do that either. Or like consultants, kind of like I was. I don't think that's quite what you want, though. I think what you really want is like someone who does this for their day job and then wants 5 to 10 hours a week on the side. So I would really try to find someone who has a day job, wants to kind of start independent consulting, 5 to 10 hours on the side, and say like, I have a month worth of projects at 10 hours a week, and there's a few tricks for consultants, especially side consultants like that. One is to, like, the better you scope the projects, the better the outcome will be, for sure. The better your onboarding is, the better the outcome will be. So like, if it takes you a whole week to get set up with your system, that's probably bad. Like, try to set up your system from scratch, and if you can set it up in like an hour, that's probably good. Stuff like that. And then the better scope the problem is, or the thing that you want to see, the better your outcome will be. So that's probably what I would find. I would find an agency that will give you a personal assistant for a month, and then someone who already has a job who wants 10 hours a week on the side to do some contracting, and I would start there.
That's a really good framework of just starting small, make more smaller bets. I'm probably very bad at picking people. I'm probably very bad at scoping projects. I'm probably very bad at onboarding. And the way to get better at those is just to do them more. And so, yeah, I'll give myself a budget of, like, I don't know, $1,000 to start with, of just like, this money is going to be spent teaching me
Yep.
how to outsource better. And if no actual work gets done, that's perfectly fine. And I'll allocate that between an agency, and I'll hire I'll hire a personal assistant there, and then I'll allocate some of that for a React developer. I like how you're describing this person as like someone who has a full-time job and just wants some stuff on the side. The last time I reached out on Twitter to see if there were React developers, actually, there was a person I talked to who fit that exact MO. I think that's going to be the first person I talked to. His name is Perry. Yeah, I haven't talked to him in months. I'll see if he's still interested in doing that. And I'll just be very open and honest with him about, hey, I'm learning how to do this. I'm going to be a terrible boss. Please give me feedback. I would love that. Onboarding is going to be terrible, and my scope is going to be terrible, and I am very interested in improving. And I think that's what that's going to look like. And then a couple months out, if I've been doing that, I think I could. That feels very manageable. That if I just get more reps in, I could get to this magical point where I have an idea for how I want to improve project. And gosh, what would just be amazing is if I could send a text message to whoever my person was and be like, hey, you know that thing we've been working on, Project X, could you implement a feature to do Y? And then I want them to reply back with like, whoa, what a cool idea. Yes, I'll get right on that. And then I continue doing whatever rabbit hole I've been down of like doing my home diagnosis project. And then he sends me a text and is like, hey, I did it. Is it like this? And then I look at it and it's like, wow, that's amazing. I just had the idea for this thing and then you implemented it. That's incredible. And this is better code than I could have written. And here's some feedback of a way that I would like to be better. And we have a healthy way of communicating so that flow feels healthy. And this person feels comfortable pushing back on what I said of like, well, actually, I now have a better understanding of the underlying thing than you do. And so I'd recommend doing it in this other way. Great. As long as we're on the same page of like the reason why we're doing the thing. That's the future I want. That would be really cool. And then I could focus much more on like deploying the thing. I think a thought that I've been hung up on for a while is that I need to be doing all the work or it's not authentic. That like,
Yeah.
if I haven't made the cookies from scratch, then they're not my cookies that I made. So like if I use a box, that doesn't count. Or if I hire a chef to make the cookies and I just give them the recipe, that doesn't count. But that doesn't quite hold because I didn't grow the wheat for the cookies in any in any of the scenarios, and I didn't harvest the sugar cane, and I didn't even come up with the recipe. I just like picked a recipe. So my value as a person is not tied to the direct work that I'm doing on the business. It's more I can go to this higher level of just sort of organization and turning money into the product that makes more money. Like that's a valuable thing to be doing, and that's a difficult idea for me to wrap my head around, which is why I'm saying it out loud, because it sure is true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty funny. That's also like the difference is going to be, so when you hire someone, like maybe it takes them 10 hours and it would have taken you 2.
Mhm.
And you're going to look at that and you're going to say, I could have done this in 2 hours. Why did it take them 10 hours?
Yeah.
But that's not the difference that you should be looking at. Like if you hire someone, you're going to have to spec thing to give to them to get done.
Mhm.
So the difference is it getting done in 10 hours versus you not doing it at all. Right.
Yeah.
Like that seems like that's what the difference is. So yeah, like spending some money to get someone to do something, it may take them longer, but it'll get done.
Yep.
Whereas if you do it, you'll go build a tiny house instead of doing whatever. So yeah, I think it's great. Start small. I'd be very interested to see how it turns out.
Cool. Would you be concerned at all? I brought this up with my dad, and he was horrified at the idea that I would, in the case of a personal assistant, give someone else access to my email. I think you are much more security conscious than me, as evidenced by you having a reasonable amount of Chrome extensions and me having an unreasonable amount of Chrome extensions. How would you be thinking about security, in particularly as it relates to someone else having access to your email? I would love to be able to do that in a trustless way, but I don't know if that's attainable. The thing I think I don't want is I don't know, they reset all the passwords to all of my bank accounts and then start transferring money out, which would be very difficult. But like a key of that would be access to my email account. Uh, what are ways you would frame that that would require less trust that could still be getting things done?
So, yeah, that's an interesting question. A few things might be another reason to go with an agency instead of just a person, because like I think you'd have less chance of that with like an agency that does it. The other is I would probably make a new email account, really, like info at or help at or whatever, and just give them access to that email account. And then you could even auto forward things from your account. So like auto forward anything like that has specific rules of types of emails that you want them to handle, but not, password reset emails or stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, that's probably where I'd start, is give them an email address that isn't yours, but that has a lot of auto-forwarded emails, something like that.
That's perfect. Because then I could still be doing my same work of like, I can triage emails. That's very fast for me to do. I can do like 1,000 emails in 10 minutes. And then I'll just add a category to that of like, this is a bucket of emails that can be handled by a personal assistant. And then that'll just go to a separate email account, christian@genco.email, or I don't know. I don't like help. I'll think of a new name. Staff at gen.co. Oh, that feels primo. And then that's the address they have access to, and then they can be interacting with whatever the problem is through that address. And then for me to add a task to their queue, I just need to forward that email to that address. Yeah, that's a perfect solution. Okay, cool. I feel good about that. And it's gonna be bad, and that's fine. I'll just do it. That's the way to get better at things. Cool. Thank you. That's all I got.
That's all I got too.
Then I will see you next week. Goodbye.
All right.